Hey everyone, I'm here with my friend Ken, and we're gonna have a party with the future Premier of British Columbia and our future MLA.
All right.
Bryan Tepper.
2 for 2.
There you go. Excited about today, excited about the future for British Columbia.
Hello, welcome officially.
Yeah, now we're ready to go.
He's changing the culture.
Hi.
Don't get anyway, yeah. So
I'm conflicted. Very good.
Yeah.
Hi everybody.
No. That's his only salvation.
You guys, the future Premier has arrived. John is here. Woohoo! Hello.
Karen is.
You guys, it is so amazing to be here and celebrate our beautiful province. How would you agree that we have the most beautiful province in the world? Yes. And we're going to make British Columbia great again. Would you please join us in the singing with some beautiful singers here? Thank you, Laura. In the singing about Canada. Let's sing it from our heart because we really believe it. Where's John?
He's right there.
John, we're going to make BC great again. Thank you for being here. We're honored that you're here. Ready? Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love, in all our sons' command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. We are here to celebrate Bryan Tepper and John Rustad and Saving BC. Karen.
Thank you, Judy.
Thanks for coming. I just wanted to say that I haven't been political since high school, but the way things are, I was asked if by a local political fixture if I would host a party, and we said, Laura and I said, political party, we're in. So anyhow, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
This is Karen McPherson.
Thank you. I was the person that asked Ken would you be open to this, and he readily agreed, which is excellent. So thank you everyone for coming this afternoon. I think it's an important time for our province and for our country. And you know, as a kid when I was growing up, we talked politics in our home all the time. We talked it in our community as well. But over time, those discussions just stopped. And for various reasons, you guys all know why, probably. But I think it's time to talk about politics.
Right.
We need to know who our elected officials are. We need to know what they're about. Our province is in a really weak state right now. And we have to take some responsibility for that, for not being engaged in politics, because we don't like politics. Politics impacts our lives. We see it more now than ever. Our families, our community, our province. So the voters are the people who elect officials. And the officials, the politicians are accountable to us. We need to hold them accountable.
That's right.
There are so many decisions that are being made today by our politicians, both provincially and nationally, that don't make any sense. And we know it.
Here, here.
So the event this afternoon is about launching our candidate, Bryan Tepper, for White Rocks of Surrey. You know, Bryan, I met Bryan last December. Well, I didn't meet him, but I ran into him and he said, hey, I'm putting my name forward for a candidate for BC, for the Conservative Party of BC. And I said, great. How can I help? Here I am today. So we are 8 weeks away from the election, which is October 19th. Polls this week show that the Conservative Party has been 1% ahead in a couple of polls of the NDP. The NDP have been like running their province into the ground. You know,
Yes.
I'm just going to be frank about it. They're running it in the ground. Like, it's just crazy what's going on. So we are looking to engage you. Like, get away from being afraid for us to hear your voice and for the politicians to hear your voice. Because we need them to hear our voice and elect them and then keep them accountable. So that's my speech. So there's 2 ways you can help right now. 2 ways. One, we need more volunteers. Because how many households have you door knocked on, Bryan, in the last 10 months?
Well, since February, we figure about 12,000 right now.
12,000. That's a lot of steps. I count my steps. That's a lot of steps. And I'm thinking, that's awesome. And so we need to help him get elected in our riding. There's 2 ways. I have some information here that I'll hand out and pass around after the guys speak, but there's 2 ways. You can go online to the Conservative Party of BC / Bryan Tepper, and there's 2 buttons there that are really, really important for you to look at this weekend. One is volunteering, and the other is giving, financial giving. So please go to that and support us in bringing our province back to some common sense politics. Okay, so Bryan, I'm introducing Bryan now. So Bryan is a retired RCMP officer. The guy looks way too young to be retired, but he is retired. And he's been living in our community for 2 decades now, Ocean Park and then Crescent Beach. Him and his beautiful wife, Rona, are very actively involved in our community. Yes, Rona? And most of them have to do with water sports, so I'm thinking, well, that's good. Maybe they can help us get out of this drowning debt we're in. So I'm just gonna look. So he is with the volunteered with the Ocean Park Community Association, the Crescent Beach Property Owner Association, the Crescent Beach Swim Club, the Surrey Orcas Water Polo, the Crescent Beach Yacht Club, and all levels of government. So please give me a warm hand in welcoming Bryan Tepper.
Take it away, Bryan. Woo!
All right, well, the first thing I'm going to say as we were singing "O Canada," was, God keep our land free, right? That's one thing we've been missing lately. Government has been intruding in our lives way too much. They've taken over our healthcare system. They're taking over the legal system with the lawyers. They've locked us down for a couple of years, whether that was appropriate or not. But the Supreme Court found it was unconstitutional, so that was an issue for me as well when that was going on. But my first thing is to thank Karen. First of all, thank you, Karen, Ken, and Laura. I think we actually only have Zishan here from the party, so he is running in Surrey Centre. I haven't decided which one of he and one of the other guys are the hardest working guys in the party, but he's definitely one of the top 2. So He's doing a fantastic job. And the other person I got to thank is Rona. If you want to put your hand up, wave there. I think more people know Rona than know me, so that's a good benefit on my side, and people actually like her. So they put up with me, and we're good. What I do want to do, I want to tell a story about Rona and how she became a conservative. So, back when we were getting married, you're gonna be excited about this one. Back when we were getting married, Rona was as she tells it, she was in the bridal boutique, and a woman came in while she was in there and said, you know what, I'm looking, the clerk came up to her and said, how can I help you? She said, well, I'm looking for a wedding dress for my 4th wedding. And which caught Rona's interest, because she was watching closely, and again, as Rona tells it, she says, well, what kind of wedding dress would you like? And she says, well, I like a long flowing white gown with a veil. You could see the sales clerk was a little taken aback and wasn't sure how to approach that, but said, maybe that kind of dress is more appropriate for a first wedding. Maybe somebody that's a little more innocent. Well, Rona says the woman was a little bit taken aback and said, well, I assure you I'm just as innocent as any of those other brides. And she said, what? She said, the sales clerk said, I don't understand how that could be. And so she tells her, she said, well, my first wedding, I married a wonderful man. Except for the excitement on our wedding day was a little too much for him. And as we were checking into the hotel, he died. And the sales clerk says, well, that's unfortunate, but what about the other ones? And she goes, well, my second one, we got married, and on our way to the reception, we got into a horrible fight in the limousine. And we haven't spoken since, and we got the marriage annulled. She said, okay, well, that's fine, but you've got one more. And she said, well, yes, that man, well, I married the president of the BC NDP. And she said, what happened was he just, for 4 years, he sat on the edge of the bed and told me how great it was going to be. And I didn't screw that up too bad. Okay, so anyway, I don't like to take things too seriously, so that's how I go there. So whether things are serious, life doesn't cease to be funny. When life's funny, things don't cease to be serious, right? Which I go into the serious problem right now. And I'm going to try and keep this all a little bit shorter. So I'm going to talk about crime. We have a huge problem going on in this province right now with the court system, right through to the policing. Coming from a policing background, I will say the police don't get the support that they need from government. It's turned into attack the police. It started a few years back when they were talking about, it came up through the United States with defunding the police. But with David Eby, I don't know how long people have known. I knew him back in the 90s when he was harassing the police on the street that were trying to arrest people. I once saw him yelling at police that were arresting a violent man on the side of the street, and he was screaming at them, "You're not allowed to do that." So that's what we're dealing with support for the police on our government front. They've allowed the decriminalization. Well, they pushed the decriminalization of drugs on us. It's been an abject failure. We need to end that immediately, and we will end that immediately. I don't know how fast John will get to that in his speech, so I will. I'm trying not to cover too much that he might cover. We want rehab and treatment. That's the way to go. Free drugs is not working. It's at best keeping people alive a little bit longer than before, but it's all caught up to us. As everybody knows, we're having people OD at an amazing rate. It's record every month, let alone every year. We have record ODs. We need to get these people in treatment, rehabilitation. I'm actually going to jump to another portion because it's going to tie in with that. Is everybody saw the automatic weapon fire we had going on in White Rock? I mean, automatic weapons have been illegal in Canada since the 70s, as long as I've been alive. So I've never seen one other than in a locker that was seized at one point, and that was it. We now have them on the streets. People are using them at will, and there's no punishment for anything that's involved in it. It's become outrageous, and the reason I say that is because myself and one of the constables that worked for me in White Rock, we'd arrested a gal. She was a drug dealer, heavy drug user. She had, I want to say we charged her probably 4 times. On the 4th time, she actually got jail time, went through rehabilitation. She actually lives quite near to where that shooting was, ran into her because of that shooting. She is married, she had 4 children, they were all taken away from her, she's got them all back, she has a job, she's living a life. She thanked us for arresting her, getting her help. So I don't know if everybody is on the streets is going to say that when they're going through drug dependency, but from what I've seen, getting people into treatment and rehabilitation works. And our court system, the catch and release system we now have. Even if you are charged, which is you got a minimal chance of getting through on a charge, they're now releasing people immediately from custody, unless they can find some other way that they very, very rarely hold somebody. And for that, I'm going to go back to the news of the last couple of days. We have a man that broke into a woman's house, sexually assaulted her, went away, he was arrested, released the next morning. He doesn't even have a condition for a curfew. No condition that would keep him from doing that again. So we have to sit with that. The other one now, about 2 months ago, everybody saw it on the news in Surrey. We had a fellow that had committed several violent offenses, arrested, broke into the woman's house, and he killed her on the sofa while she was watching TV and her boyfriend had gone off to the bathroom. So we end up with that. And my final story on this, just to bring everybody up, we have the guy that had his charges dropped because of delays in the court system. The judges are using, I call it excuses to find reasons to drop things. I don't know why you would use an arbitrary deadline to say this has been too long to charge on a man that sexually assaulted a 3-year-old girl. Released without charges. And really, even if he was not guilty, he no longer has the ability to clear his name. So either way, society loses, he loses. That's what I was going to say. In summation to that, the laws are made in Ottawa. We administer them here in the province. It's time that we actually administer them and not just let them languish out and have nothing to say about them. I wasn't going to bring anything else up with the economy because it came out today and I have to read the numbers off this. But since 2022, the NDP have created 63,800 public sector jobs. There's been 5,300 private sector jobs created in that same time. That comes out to 12 public sector jobs for every one person that's paying for those private sector jobs. Obviously, we can't keep up with that because I don't know how much that person in the private sector can make, but you got to pay for 12 people now. They set a record for a deficit, and not only that, they managed to break it by $829 million that they've gone over budget this year. The last thing I want to say is, finish up, during my career, the RCMP, I've been kicked, punched, scratched, spit on, and I think that actually counts for a basic training for being in government, so I think I'm ready to go. All right, so now the important bit here. Okay, I want to introduce you to someone we'll all get to know very well in the next 4 years. And a man I respect more every time we talk. When I first met John, I hadn't joined the Conservative Party of BC. He was in South Surrey at a rally that is now going to be my campaign office over on King George Highway. You'll see signs soon, I believe. You know what, I'm going to say John, and if you look at John, he seems an unassuming man, but when I heard him speak, there's something that drew me in. I think it was the no-nonsense nature of his presentation. And that had not been happening in the last party I had been part of. And I think everybody started to sort of see that, and that's what's happened with this blue wave that we're ending up with here. At the time, I hadn't been thinking about running, but thanks to several of the people here, there's a few of you out here, I just won't go through that, but, and then there's a couple of others, they sucked me in. So it took me a little while to decide. I think it was the springtime. I probably met John, talked to him in probably May, I think, was the first time, and we were sort of discussing it, and then it took till December to finally decide to run. But what finally made my decision up to run was John has had all the candidates make a pledge that will represent our ridings before we represent the party. And I think that's a novel idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's get back to representing our people. Since then, John has done nothing but impress. Interview after interview, he's rock solid on common sense. We don't worry about who gets the credit. If it's a good idea, it's a good idea. We don't need any more problems like the bridge and tunnel fiasco that we've had. We had a bridge, somebody else came up with the idea, new government came in, canceled it, we need a tunnel. Whatever works the best, what we should do. I don't care who comes up with the idea, I don't care who comes up with the credit. That's how we've managed to attract candidates. Well, John has been the one that's attracted candidates all over the political spectrum. We've had NDP, old NDP people join us. We've had some Greens come over. And then, of course, you know, a lot of us came from the old Liberal Party. So that's what we're up to today. So, with that, I want to introduce John Rustad, leader of the Conservative Party of British Columbia, and our next Premier.
Thanks, Brian. It's great to be able to be here, and I'm so happy actually to be having the chance to be back down in this neck of the woods. I've been traveling around all over the province, and I can tell you there's one thing in common that everybody has, and that is they want to get rid of this socialist government and the absolute destruction that it's doing in British Columbia. Because it doesn't matter what sector you look at or what component you look at, lives are being destroyed by the drugs, the economy is being destroyed, our resource sector is in a mess. You know, we've got a crisis in housing, we've got a crisis in affordability, we've got a crisis in healthcare, we've got a crisis in everything. And I got to tell you something, when I go around the province, people are really frustrated. They're saying, why should I stay here in British Columbia? 1 in 3 people in this province are thinking about leaving. 1 in 2 youth are thinking about leaving. And that's the really scary part, because that is our future. I mean, that's where their kids or grandkids, that is the future of the province. And they're saying, I can't make a go of it here in this province. To me, that is what is just so wrong. British Columbia is the place that everybody came to. And it doesn't matter if you're 5th or 6th generation, or whether you just moved here. Everybody came to this province with that hope to be able to build a future, to be able to find a way to be able to provide for your family, to give your children that opportunity or your grandchildren that opportunity. That was the promise of British Columbia. And that, quite frankly, is what has now been destroyed. And it's not just the NDP, I mean, this has been happening over a number of years. But the reality is we've been so wrapped up in BC, in ideologies and in politics, that we've forgotten the basics, which is just servicing people, making sure that everybody can have that opportunity to build a future, making sure that everybody has that opportunity to be able to say, I'm proud to be a British Columbian. And I can tell you, I am a proud Canadian, and I'm a proud British Columbian, and we've got a government that has actually told the public sector, you can't call people British Columbians, because it might offend somebody. And I'm sorry. You know, like I say, I'm proud to call myself a British Columbian. I'm proud to call people that live here British Columbians, because this is a great province. It has all that potential. There's so much that we need to do. And like I say, you know, Brian touched on so many things beforehand. It's so many things to do. Like, where do you start? We're running an $8 billion deficit, the largest in BC's history. 10% of our budget is a deficit. We have all the resource sector that's looking at leaving this province. They can't make a go of it. Where do you start with all of this? And I think about it, and I think, you know, the place to start as the Conservative Party of British Columbia is really just simple. In everything we do, let's strip away the layers of bureaucracy, let's strip away the layers of process, and let's just get back to the basics of getting things done. Now, some language I like to use, and I'm probably going to use in the speech, in the debate, but I'll use it here. Really what we need to stand for is just to get shit done. And I'm sorry for using that language, but that's what we have to do. So for example, in the situation with the addictions and all of those sort of problems, and Brian talked about it and related some stories, we just need to get rid of the decriminalization. I mean, it makes no sense. We're taking tools away from the police to be able to have a civil society. If somebody is doing drugs in the doorstep of a business, the police can't do anything about it if it's decriminalized. Now, Eby said he's going to back away from doing this. That's fine. And then he sends Bonnie Henry to Ottawa that says he wants to double down on decriminalization and expand safe supply, so that safe supply be available in our basically our grocery stores. I mean, it's just crazy to think. She is an employee of the government. She's representing the government. She's going out and promoting this. And they basically says, no, we're not going to do this. Well, let's wait to see what would happen after the election should we have that tragedy of an NDP government again, because clearly that is what he's looking at doing. So we'll end decriminalization. We're going to end safe supply as well, because all that is doing is creating the next generation of addicts. Addicts are going in, they're getting safe supply, they're coming out, they're handing it over to the dealers are then handing them the street drugs that they want. Then the dealers take those drugs and then start distributing them, start selling them. This doesn't make any sense to me. We need to build out everything from doctor-prescribed treatment to short-term treatment and recovery to long-term recovery, because sometimes it takes more than just to get over an addiction. Sometimes they have to actually learn life skills, break the chain of habits that they have, and have that ability then to be able to find a future. We're actually going to have to look, quite frankly, at involuntary care. What I mean by that is, if you've got somebody who's OD'd and has been brought back to life, clearly under the Mental Health Act, they are not capable of making a decision for themselves. They are at risk of harming themselves. And I think it's the role of government to say, if somebody's in that state, the government needs to step in and put them into care, put them into treatment. And so that's what we will do. And more than that, there was a couple in, I can't remember which community they're from. There's a couple that had a 14-year-old son and 11-year-old daughter, and both those children were addicted. Both those children were suffering from addiction. And in British Columbia, if those children did not want to go into care, or into treatment, I should say, there was no option for you. There was no way as a parent that you could help your child. So in that particular family, they took out a second mortgage and spent $20,000 per child to send them down to the States into treatment. Now the good news is, they both come back. One is now into university, the second one is graduating, and they're doing just fine. And I think any parent would want that for the child. Any parent would say, I'm going to do everything I can for your child, because at the end of the day, that's why you have children, right? You want to be able to look after them, you want to make sure they have a good future. So we've got to give that option in British Columbia. If a parent is sitting in that situation where they want to be able to help their child, we are going to make sure there's an opportunity for them to be able to have that service here in British Columbia and to get them healthy and onto a track where they can build their future, because it's just the right thing to do. One more thing on the addiction stuff I just want to touch on, and that is, many years ago, we did away with long-term care. The drugs that are on the streets today, doctors are telling me within 2 to 3 years can cause permanent brain damage. There are many people today that will never be able to recover to a full lifestyle. There are many people today that do not have the ability to be able to carry on in society. And we seem to think it is okay and humane to leave them living on a street. And I just think that is completely wrong. I think as a society, we need to be able to care for these people. We need to be able to provide them with some level of dignity and some level of care. And so we're going to do that. We will create facilities to give an opportunity for these people to have that level of care, so that at least they can have some sort of quality of life in our society and not be out living in the streets. Because like I say, it's just the right thing to do. And we're liable to get challenged. We're going to have to fight it. I get that. But at the end of the day, this is what we need to be as the Conservative Party. It's not about the politics of one side or another. It's just to stand for what's right. Try to do the right thing for people in British Columbia. And so that's an approach we're going to take in everything we do. I want to go on talking a little bit about the economy. I mean, there's so many things we can touch on, but look, nobody wants to invest in this province. Think about it. Our forest sector used to be the backbone of much of the economy. It has actually lost almost 2/3 under the NDP in just 7 years. It's just absolutely dead. So we've gone from cutting close to 75 million cubic meters, and this year I'll be surprised if we even hit 30 million cubic meters. It'll probably be less than that. This is what the NDP have done to our forest sector. And forestry, sometimes confused. Some people say, well, we shouldn't be cutting trees, we should be cutting trees. We have 60 million hectares of treed landscape in British Columbia. We only operate on about 22 million hectares. That means there's 38 million hectares of our forest and landscape that will never see industrial forestry activity, ever. It's already there, it's locked in. Out of that 22 million hectares that are left, much of that is under tremendous constraints already. But what we need to do is we need to create stability. We've got a situation where a government will not issue permits. They won't allow for people to be able to access the fiber. And if you can't get permits, how do you operate? You don't have the trees. So we've got a situation, for example, in Merritt, where we had these big wildfires go through. There's millions of cubic meters of wood that has been damaged and is dying or is dead. And they can't get permits. They can't get permits to cut that wood, to get it back replanted, to do the rehabilitation that needs to be done on the sites. And that's, to me, is just crazy, because people have lost jobs. Now, the mill managed to get up and running, they managed to get another permit, so they got a little bit of wood to move through. But this just seems to be absolutely silly. Why wouldn't we be issuing these permits? Get those sites rehabilitated. Make sure that, they can become productive forests again. In Alberta, when they have a big wildfire in Alberta, 3 weeks later they've got the permits. And they're out logging, and they're out doing the rehabilitation work, and they're planting, and getting it back to a healthy state and a healthy forest. And yet, we can take years, and we're not even getting these permits out the door. So these are things we're going to change. We're going to get to a place where, to get things done in British Columbia, we're going to have a single project, single permit process. So we're going to strip away these layers of bureaucracy, all this time, all this cost, and so that we can drive investment in this province. We have 17 mines in this province which are permitted or ready to be permitted. Those 17 mines represent a $38 billion investment, will generate between 12 and 13,000 jobs. And over the life of that mine, those mines will add about $800 billion to British Columbia's GDP. We want to fix healthcare. We want to fix addictions. We want to fix crime. We need revenue to do that. And so we need to be able to get to yes on these projects. We need to be able to ensure that they can get through and we can drive that investment in BC, and people can have a reasonable expectation for return on their investment. And I think about all these things, and we talk about it from a business perspective, but the reality is this: if you're going to tackle affordability, you need to be able to create good jobs. If you're going to tackle the affordability issue, you need to be able to see wage growth. You need to see a fact that families can stay in this province instead of moving out and leaving. So all of this is about trying to create that environment for people to be able to invest in this province, create those jobs, and also pay good wages for people. We need to do a couple other things too. Like I say, you wonder where to start and how much to talk about, because there's so many things that need changes with this government. So maybe I want to touch on 3 or 4 more things. Healthcare. I'm just going to go over this quickly in terms of healthcare. Healthcare is in a complete crisis in BC. It is on the verge of collapse. You look at it around the province. 10 years ago, did we ever hear about ER rooms closing?
No.
Or diversions? Maybe once in a while you'd have a rare situation, but not daily in some region of the province, and not the long periods of time, which is what we're hearing today.
Not Peace Arch.
What's that? Not Peace Arch. Yeah. So, and you've got 1 million people in this province that don't have a family doctor. Our emergency rooms are jammed. You go to emergency room, they post on their expected 8-hour or 10-hour or 12-hour wait to go into an emergency room. There was a expecting mom who went into Surrey Memorial to deliver. She was in labor. She waited there 8 hours in the emergency room, and they finally said, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to fit you in. They had to put her into a cab, and she had to travel to New Westminster to go into the emergency room at New Westminster. And she got into the emergency room at New Westminster, and they saw her condition and rushed her immediately in. She was within an hour or 2 of dying and losing the child. That is the level of care we have, and that is completely unacceptable in this province. When you have, somebody who calls me and says, my wife has got a very aggressive cancer. She needs surgery. And the response from the system is, sorry, we can get you in 2 months from now. That is unacceptable in this province. This is why we need change, right? We need to get to a system that we're actually focused on the people, not on the system. I I think it was August, September of 2022, there was a court case, Bryan Day versus the province, and there was a bunch of things around that. And the argument that the province made essentially was saying that the system was more important than patient suffering. And the worst part is the judge agreed with the province. So this is why we need to bring about change. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to look at models that are working far better than British Columbia. So we're looking at the European models that are they're universal health care, just like we have here in British Columbia. Everybody, the government pays for the services, but the government will purchase those services from both government and non-government agencies. Because what ends up happening with that is you're better utilizing the professionals that we have in the system. There's a surgeon in Vancouver. He was a top vascular surgeon. He's retired. He worked at Vancouver General. And he would get 8 hours of surgery time a week. He could very easily be doing 20, 30, or 40 hours, but that was all the time he was given in a week. And he would often go into the system for an 8 o'clock start. Usually there was delays. Sometimes as late as 9 or even 9:30. He'd be working through his surgery list over the day, and at 1:30 in the afternoon, an administrator would come in and say, "You're going to be done by 4, right? That's all the time you have. There'll be consequences if you're not done by 4. So he would then wrap up his surgery, and he would look at the next surgery and say, "If there are any complications, could I get this completed by 4? And if the answer was no, that was the end of his day. Because the system is more important than the patient. And this is why we have to shift this thing around and put the patients first. Make sure that the money follows the patient, and that as a government we're purchasing services. Make sure that we put in guarantees for wait times, particularly for things like surgery. If you need services in surgery for cancer, if you need those services and we cannot deliver them in the timely way within British Columbia, then we'll purchase those services from another jurisdiction, whether it's outside of the province or even outside of the country. Because, in my opinion, we've got to make sure that we put people first, that they get those services within the time that's needed. So it's a big shift in terms of how we do healthcare, and I can tell you whoever the finance minister is going to pull the hair out and curse and swear at me, because what it means is that it isn't a fixed cost for healthcare, but it's a cost that follows the patients and deals with the wait lists that we have and the wait times that we have so that we can get those services improved. Now the good news is, over time, this will actually end up saving us money, because our healthcare system is the second most expensive in the world. The ones in Europe that are using this kind of model are actually much more cost effective on a cost per capita basis. And here's one of the reasons why. In Canada, or sorry to say in Germany, Germany has twice the population of Canada. Yet Canada has 10 times as many administrators. The system is completely burdened with all of this administration and process that's in place. Close to 40% of the nurses today are administrators. We need to get these people back, delivering services on the front lines for people, not pushing paper and creating, this mess of bureaucracy that's happening in our healthcare system. So we're going to do that. We're going to clean that up, and I tell you, that's going to cause a lot of fuss, be a lot of problems. But the good news is we can do all of that within the Canada Health Act. We don't have to have changes from Ottawa to be able to implement it. And we just have to be brave enough to say what we have is not working, so we're going to change it. And we're going to have to go through all those issues that we need to make sure that gets done. I want to touch on education for a second. Because when we talk about our kids being the future, of course, educating is one of the most important things that we need to do. Our education system has become very focused on teaching kids what to think, instead of teaching kids how to think. So we need to reverse that. We need to make sure that all the material in our education system is neutral, that it's giving kids facts, that it's preparing them for their future. Brent, nice to see you here. Glad you can make it. Brent Chapman, he's our candidate. He's nice, sir. So we need to make sure that that's the way our education system. And so this stuff that's going on with, and I hate using this language, but there's no better way to describe it, the sexualization of our kids in our schools, that's got to come to an end. That nonsense has got to be taken out of our schools, and that's so true and what have you. And so we're going to do that, but we're also going to make sure that we put in a very solid anti-bullying program and support for students that need it, because there's lots of kids that have challenges. We want to make sure that every kid has an opportunity to be able to learn, have their education, have support, and get through these difficult times. So that's just briefly some of the things that we'll do in education. Crime. You know, Bryan talked a lot about crime. The reality is, with the bail system that we have and this rotating door and these people that are getting thrown back out onto the streets and just committing more crime, criminals are getting emboldened to do more serious crimes because there's no consequences. And I'm sorry, I actually believe strongly when people are committing serious crimes or when people are, these prolific offenders, they need to do time. There needs to be a consequence. And so we're going to push for bail reform, of course, because we need to get that done. We're also going to push the federal government for guaranteed minimum sentencing, because it is time that we just say, look, enough is enough. These people are committing these crimes and committing these problems, and we need them off our streets. I'm told by police that 20% of the people that are committing crimes are committing 80% of the crimes. So even a small reduction of that, getting these people off our streets, will make a huge difference in terms of reducing the crimes that we have in our society. So those are the kind of things that we're going to do. We're also going to support, of course, our police and the work that needs to be done. We need to expand some of those police forces. And just today, we went out and we put a press release out. There was a call from Delta to deal with the ports. We have not had a police force focused on our ports since 1997.
Shame.
Less than 1% of the containers that come into British Columbia are actually checked. It is wide open for potential abuse. It's wide open for criminal activity, for organized crime. And quite frankly, I just find that offensive that is what it's become in British Columbia. So we are going to make sure that we dedicate a police force, whether it's RCMP or whether it's otherwise, that it's going to be an investigative force that's going to be dealing with our ports across this province, making sure, quite frankly, that we focus on stopping some of these drugs that are coming in, and making sure that our ports are not home bases for criminal activity, particularly for that organized crime. So that's going to be a bit of a shift, but I'll tell you something else we're going to do. We're going to send Ottawa the bill, because quite frankly, ports is federal and they should be paying for this. So we're going to have that fight with Ottawa, whoever's in there. And speaking of Ottawa, I just want to touch on a couple of little things. We've got a problem with immigration in BC. And part of this is, one of the problems is housing, but it's also we need people coming into this province. And so I actually think that we should be taking on that responsibility ourselves. I think we should not be having those decisions made 3,000 miles from here. And so I'm going to be pushing Ottawa to take on our immigration like Quebec does, so that we can actually set the targets of what we're looking for in our province, the skill sets that we need. We can work with foreign universities and foreign educational institutions to make sure that the training that they're receiving meets our standards, so that when they come into this province, they come in and they're ready to work and they can get into the various fields that we have. Because I tell you, we're shortage everything from truck drivers to teachers, from doctors to carpenters, and everything across the screen. We're short of those people, so we need to make sure when people come here, they're ready to work. They can get directly into the workforce. And I joke a little bit about this, because we've got such a crisis in housing, but quite frankly, we need people to come in and be able to build homes. So, one of the first things is, hey, you can build a home as an immigrant, great, come on into British Columbia and build your own home, and then build a home for somebody else, right? Because we need homes in BC. So I joke a little bit about that, but when I talk to the construction sector, developers about building out our housing supply that we need, that's the big thing they say is they don't have the people. Housing starts in British Columbia have dropped. They aren't going up. We need to double housing starts, and they're declining this year. But like I say, when I ask them, they say, well, there's kind of three things. First of all, we can't get permits. It takes 4 to 7 years to get permits and through a process. Second thing is the cost structure is so high that, it makes it almost impossible for things to be profitable. And the third thing is, even if we could get permits, we can't get the people to build it. So these are the things that we need to work on to make sure that we get housing built in BC. So that's immigration. The other thing I want to talk about federally is I actually think we should take control of our own coasts. As a province, we often have decisions that are made 3,000 miles away, and it's often focused on Atlantic Canada, and we're kind of added in or lumped in or grouped with those decisions. And so I actually think it's time that British Columbia takes control of our own waterways and our own coasts. So we're going to be talking to the federal government about doing a delegated authority for having us take that responsibility on so that we can manage our coast and we can get through these issues that we need to in a much better way. One more thing on the federal side that I just want to touch on is, this is the best country in the world. Canada really is. I mean, I've had the opportunity to travel a little bit, the privilege to travel around to some other countries, and I got to tell you, this place is great. We have so much going for us. We've got all these resources. We've got, well-trained, well-educated population, but we're just hopelessly managed, and we have no sense of who we are as a nation. So I actually think what we need to do, quite frankly, is we need to create a Canada-wide free trade agreement. It's easier for me to trade with the United States than it is to trade with other provinces. We have no sense of who we are as a nation. So this is not something that Ottawa can do. This has to be driven by the provinces. And so that's something that I want to take on behalf of British Columbians, is to actually make that effort to create a Canada-wide free trade agreement and start having a sense of who we are as a country. Start actually working as a country to build up this nation and create those opportunities. Because we've got, some provinces that are saying, they want to go with the Sovereignty Act, and other provinces saying we don't want anything to do with the other guys, all these fights and stuff. We've got to put all that aside. Because quite frankly, if we, as a small trading jurisdiction, which is what Canada is, even though we've got lots of goods to trade, we need to have that sense. We need to be able to make sure as a country that we are looking after each other, looking after our backs. And speaking of that, I want to get back to the three basics that as a government we need to do. There are three things you need to survive. You need housing, you need food, and you need energy. And right now, government is taxing the crap out of all three of those things. So we're going to do everything we can to expand our agriculture production. We need to double agriculture production in this province to look after it. 2/3 of the food that we consume comes from outside of our province. So we'll deal with that. We're going to get rid of the carbon tax. We're going to drive down the cost for our fuel, make sure that life can be more affordable. And we're going to do significant steps on improving not only supply of housing, but affordability by dealing with tax measures and dealing with changes to our building code, driving down those costs and making some strategic investments in communities to drive down those development charges. There's a lot of work to do, folks, as the Conservative Party. There's a ton that needs to be done. And I've said to the candidates, and they've heard this many times, that should we have that on our forming government, be prepared for a lot of work. Because there is so much change that's needed. There's so many things that we need to get done in this province because we have been going in the wrong direction for just way, way too long. And this NDP has driven us into the ground. And we need, quite frankly, just to be bold enough to say enough is enough. Let's get back to just common sense change in this province that can help to improve lives and make us proud once again to say we're British Columbians. Thanks everybody for coming out.
Is there any Q&A at all?
Do you want to do Q&A? Sure. Yeah. Happy to do some questions and
What's the
answers.
road to victory?
What's that?
What's the road to getting elected?
Good question.
Well, right now, the polls are actually showing us with anywhere from a 1 to 3 point lead over the NDP. If that is the result on election day, we will form government. That's plain and simple. If that is our vote on election day, we'll form government. However, the only way that happens is we need to make sure that we can win on the ground. It's fine to have lots of people saying they're interested in supporting us. That's good. We are particularly very strong with 18 to 35. The young people that desperately want change, and it makes sense, and half the people want to leave this province because they can't live here. Obviously, they're not going to vote for the government that's driving them out of the province. However, where we are actually needing a lot of support is the 60 plus. Because the 60 plus are still kind of wondering, well, maybe it should be United, maybe it should be the Conservative Party, and well, we're not sure about the Conservative Party, so I don't know, maybe we should keep the NDP. Like there's that kind of confusion that's going on.
Crazy.
So we need lots of people to be engaged, talking to people about who we are, what we're doing, and about what we are as the Conservative Party to make sure that they understand and have that opportunity to be able to support us on election day.
Would you mind asking your question about the building and the Airbnb stuff?
Oh, we've being involved in different construction projects around the province. We had a project in Kelowna ready to go next to the new UBC campus. And when the Airbnb edict came down, we lost all our pre-sales. So now there's not going to be 360 units because there is no pre-sale requirement met to get financing. So it's just a horrible short-term policy.
So the question was about short-term rentals, Airbnbs. Here's what EB has done with housing. They said, first of all, it's foreign investors that are creating the problem. And then they said it's speculators that are creating the problem. Then they said it's people with empty houses that are creating the problem. Now they're saying it's Airbnb or short-term rentals that's the problem. The reality is this, it's government that's the problem.
That's right.
It's government that's the problem with housing, not Airbnb or anything else. So we're actually going to reverse that act. Like, we're going to get rid of it. It will be repealed, because I actually believe strongly that it is local government that needs to make the decisions about Airbnbs and about short-term rentals. It's local government that does the zoning. It's local government that issues the business licenses. It should not be done by the province. And so I will get back to that. Airbnb, that legislation is gone. Matter of fact, actually, the first piece of legislation I would love to move forward, and I'm being a little cheeky by saying this, but it'd be called the NDP Repeal Act, and we'd have a whole list of their bills and just get rid of that junk.
On immigration, and it's a big problem. And what are you going to do about shutting down these phony institutions set up for the sole purpose of getting people into this country and selling it for, say, $100,000? These kids come in, they're going to some phony school, getting some BS degree or what have you, or diploma, and they're living in flop houses. They're 25 to a house kind of thing. Given that falls under provincial jurisdiction, can you shut that down?
Yes.
Good.
And we will. We'll look at it, and I'll just keep it straight, plain and simple. So that is something we're going to look at, certainly advanced education, making sure that the facilities in this province are certified, meeting the standards, and not taking advantage of students, not taking advantage of people coming in, and certainly not being used as a backdoor for immigration.
Okay, Hutch, we'll go Hutch first. And then
John, good afternoon. I'm desperate to watch your interview with Jordan Peterson. When is it coming out? Please tell me it's going to be before the election, because I think it could be groundbreaking.
So, train moment. No,
we might not hear.
So we've talked to Jordan Peterson's crew about getting it out. We've asked them to get it out as soon as they can. So it may come out sooner than this, but I think at the very latest it'll be out September 2nd.
Thank you.
And I have to admit, it was a real pleasure to meet him. They actually invited us to come for the interview. And so I thought, well, that was pretty cool, being invited, because he's only done 3 other politicians. He's done, or 2 other politicians, current politicians, he's done, what's his name, Daniel Smith, and he's done Pierre Poilievre. So I was quite privileged. And so, it was wonderful to meet him. I have to admit as well that usually they do these things by remotely. They send a crew out to wherever you are. Jordan's usually somewhere else in the world, and he just happened to be in Fairview in Alberta, which is his hometown, and I just happened to be up in the Peace Country at the time, and so I just stayed an extra day and drove up to Fairview and actually got to meet him in person. So it was great. We had a good conversation.
Richard.
Okay, on the immigration and the crime, is my opinion, any immigrant who comes to the country and commits a crime, they and their extended family should be sent home, never to come back here again.
Yeah. So
That's number 1.
yeah, and I'm in agreement. Like if you've got somebody who's not a Canadian citizen who's come into this country and is committing a serious crime, we should have an opportunity to be able to give them the exit door.
Yeah. Number 2, with the housing concerns we have right now, we live in a part of the country where we're bound by 5 things, 5 restrictions. U.S. border, Pacific Ocean, North Shore Mountains, Battlefield and ALR, plus a underground water system that really restricts where we can go. The easiest and simplest way to relieve that is take some of the land out of the ALR and allow some housing to live there. Now, when NDP first went in back in 1973, there were thousands of hectares in the ALR. According to Canada, there are thousands more. I asked them one time, I said, do you keep track? How many hectares have been put to use for agricultural purposes in that period of time? The answer was, we don't keep records on that. I should have said, you keep your job, don't you?
So the question is whether we'd be able to use agricultural land. I would say there's a 6th constraint to housing, and quite frankly, that's provincial government. So that needs to go. However, would we use agricultural land for housing? Our priority initially here is going to be to double food production and put a plan to be able to do that. And so we want to make sure that our agricultural land can meet those needs that we need in this province so that we can look after our own people in terms of meeting those needs. However, there is agricultural land that is, the soils are very poor or rocky, that is isolated, that will never be able to be used for production. And we want to be able to look at that land with an eye to being able to do something, whether it's housing, whether it's industrial land, whether it's for schools, whatever the case may be. So we are going to take a look at some of that, but the key is we want to make sure that we're on that path that we need to be able to increase our agriculture production in BC.
Thank you, John. We've all seen Trudeau's obsession with censorship, of speech censorship, and this new bill he's proposed, this online harms bill, is just extremely dangerous, that an anonymous person can accuse you of something because their feelings might be hurt. So it's very dangerous, and we've all seen the 1,000, maybe 1,400 people arrested in England for posting something on Facebook. Well, we have an elderly gentleman in Chilliwack that's in front of the Human Rights Court because he posted something on Facebook and maybe hurt someone's feelings, and he's in front of the Human Rights Court. And so I just want to say thank you for your willingness to stand up against the sexualization of our children. And my son was in grade 12 when this whole, and Christy Clark brought in this SOGI thing, the BC Liberals brought it in, so I'm so glad that we're going to be ones to take it out. But I would love to encourage us all to stand up for this school board trustee and other trustees that have courage to stand up. That's for the children of our schools.
Next question then?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I wasn't going to bring this up, but it was kind of timely with something my brother said today. I'm the grandson of a chief, Indigenous. I'm entitled to status. I refuse to get it because it's racism, and it's rampant in Canada. Nobody can talk about it because you get erased if you question the way the government is. I mean, we have incidents down here in Crescent Beach where you can't dig a post hole in without having the archaeological team come and till the soil in case they run into something. And it's the disgraceful part of it is growing up in a household that family and good friends are Indigenous. It denies access to a good life by so many Indigenous children that are stuck on reserves, having to fit into this mold that their political leaders want to promote because of all the money they get. And my brother sold his last fishing boat today to a young Indigenous fellow who told him that people don't know what it's like to be in a hierarchy where you have kings and queens. It's like at the medieval times. We're just serfs, he said. The money goes to the band councils and the chiefs, and we don't see anything of it. If anybody I've been all over the coast and up in the interior and seen what the conditions are like on these reserves. And I asked a good friend of mine one time what he did with all the money he got, and he said, David, life in the reserve is just like life off. The rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. And my point is that most people in our society and province and the country can't even talk about this, but they'll talk about it privately because it's a big concern. And you're talking about doing all these things with developing houses and everything, and business and logging. You keep running into special situations with the local bands, and I don't want to put you on the spot because it's so easy for the media to say, oh, this guy Rustad, he's obviously against Native, and it's nothing to do with being against Native. It's being for Natives as regular folks rather than special folks.
And I'm glad you raised that because it is a big issue, and in many cases it's the elephant in the room on so many issues. So you may not know this, but I used to be the Minister for Aboriginal Relations and Reconciliation in BC. I was that for over 4 years. I signed 435 agreements with First Nations. I know how to get things done with First Nations, to work through things. I signed all the pipeline agreements out to the coast, well, not quite all of them, most of them on the coast, worked on sites on that, dealt with getting mines open, dealt with all these sort of issues. So the challenge we have is this, and I'm going to take a minute to talk about this. So, sorry about that.
It's not me, it's you guys.
It's okay, we're okay. We're okay. This is good. So, we have a constitution. Section 35 of the Constitution has enshrined Aboriginal rights, which also includes title. There's nothing we can do. The Constitution has created two classes of people in this country. It has. And so it is what it is. Unless we're going to change our Constitution, which I think has got about a 0.00001% chance of that happening. We have to live with this. We have to deal with this. and which was a lot of what I did when I was the minister, is how do you work through and how do you deal with this. So what the government is currently doing with the approach which is called DRIPA, the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, we're going to repeal that act.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
what it is. And people say, how could you do that? You're racist. And I say, no. Reconciliation is a people to a people. It's not a government to a government. Government to government is part of it, but it's people to people. And if you've got a piece of legislation that is creating friction between people, that is not reconciliation.
Yes.
And that's why it has to go, it has to change. So we'll keep using UNDRIP as some guiding principles in terms of how we work with First Nations. But what we want to focus on is actually going to what we call economic reconciliation, where we build out additional new economic opportunities that First Nations have the opportunity to be able to fully participate in that, to be able to build out for their people so that we see Indigenous and non-Indigenous prosper, and that it impacts the people on the ground level, not just the hierarchy. And that's where I want to get to. And that's what we did with many of the agreements that I did. So many of the First Nations, entered that. And I'll tell you a little story, and I've said this many times, but when we were signing these agreements on the pipelines, one of the chiefs for the pipeline who was signing the agreement, he was in tears. And I was thinking, oh my God, this is bad. Like, we shouldn't be doing this. And he said, no, you don't understand. The week prior, 5 youth had tried to commit suicide, 1 had died. This opens up an opportunity for hope, opens up an opportunity for them to be able to see a future, to be able to see something beyond the cycle of poverty that they've grown up on reserve. To be able to hope that maybe they can have a prosperous future and build that too and have respect. That's what we want to be able to build in BC, right across BC with all the opportunities we're looking at with First Nations. And let's get away with this, this issues of government to government and money transferring and benefits not going forward. Another government check is not the answer. Creating an economy, getting people engaged, having them going out, being able to buy cars and houses and going on holidays, that is how you solve things. That's how you bring about true reconciliation. Got time for one more.
You want more?
One more.
Okay, well, who's got a question?
Any other questions?
Over there. Well, sorry.
Hi, sorry. Bill 44. How do
It'll get repealed.
Yeah.
Yay!
That's an easy one.
And so, for people that don't know, Bill 44 is this bill that provincial government has come in and said, we're overriding your official community plans. We're allowing for densification up to 4 or maybe even 6 residents on a single lot. And by the way, part of the bill also says you don't even get to have public input. We're canceling any opportunity for public hearings. So that, in my opinion, is just draconian. That is an overreach by government, by an authoritarian person who is David Eby. I mean, David Eby is a hardcore socialist. He's an authoritarian. 2 generations ago, we would call that a communist. But most people don't know what communist is anymore, so that's what he is. So we'll bring that to an end, because I actually believe strongly you can't, as a province, step up to the plate and say, we're going to expand housing, we're going to expand, those opportunities, because you aren't dealing with parking, you're not dealing with traffic, you're not dealing with water and sewer, you're not dealing with parks, you're not dealing with playgrounds, you're not dealing with schools, you're not dealing with any of that kind of stuff. And so all you've done is created chaos. So the government makes it sound like they're doing something good, at the same time, they're actually creating tremendous problems. So we'll get rid of that, but what we're going to do instead, we're going to work with municipalities, we're going to try to get pre-zoning done for densification. They will go through the process in terms of changing their official community plan for that, and then we'll come in and support for things like water and sewer upgrades. And so when developers come in to be able to build out houses, or whether it's mom and pops that want to build it, or whether it's somebody else, they don't have to go through that long process.
What's the question?
Sure, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I'm kind of worried. I appreciate you coming here today. I got much more confidence in you. I didn't know pretty much about you. I'm worried about the right vote being split.
Yep.
I think everybody in the room is worried about that. You're on a good track. You got my vote.
Thank you.
You left the United Party.
I was kicked out of the United Party.
Being a climate change denier and stuff
I've never denied climate change.
So this could come up. It was one of Kevin Falcon's sort of weapons. Carbon tax, I've read about that it is penal to our country when other countries are just going to supply the same product without having that tax, so you're killing our industry. Is that sort of your defense to Kevin's attack on your being climate change denier?
You know what? When Kevin attacks me on things like that, I will be attacking the Premier in my response. Because he's at 9% in the polls, why would I be wasting time debating him? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't mean that to be mean or to be vindictive. He's just 9% polls. I'm not going to be debating Sonia. When she asks me a question, I'm going to be attacking the Premier, right, in terms of it. So let me ask, maybe just talk about this for a second here then, because this is the question that everybody has, which is, how do we deal with BCU and the potential split? Everybody points to 1996 and says, you know, the BC Reform Party at the time, or Reform BC, whatever it was called, got 9% of the vote provincially, and yet that ended up leading to 12 or 16 seats for the NDP, and they ended up forming a government. There's a huge difference today. The difference is, back then, the Reform Party had a huge base in rural BC. They got 21% in rural BC. And they got virtually nothing in other parts of the province, which averaged out to 9%. That 21% split the vote on a dozen seats or more. That is what ultimately led to the NDP winning power. At 9% with the BC United, which is where they're at today, they don't have a base. Their strongest polling area is downtown Victoria. Okay, the second strongest polling is like Delta South or parts of Vancouver. In Surrey, they're below they're like 6-7%. In northern BC, they're like 4 to 8%. There's a few areas where they spike up a little bit higher, and so they're not going to be as big a factor in many of the areas as something like 96 is. There is about half a dozen ridings that they could impact. There's no question there, and so if we don't have that opportunity to remove them off the table, to find some way to be able to work together, I just have to hope that the people unite around a single objective, which is to get rid of this very destructive NDP government in BC. So that's what we'll be campaigning on. But when Kevin Falcon asks me a question, I will be responding with my attack against David Eby and what we're going to be doing, because there's no point dealing with that nonsense. All right, everybody, thanks very much. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for supporting Bryan. It's going to be a great candidate for us. It's going to be a great MLA for us and working so hard. I'd like to say, Zishan, thank you for coming out as well. Where'd you go, Brent? Where is he? Back there somewhere.
We can answer more questions too when
Yeah.
he's gone.
Anyway, and like I say, we got a great team that's running for us around the province. Don't let the media fool you about all this nonsense and stuff that comes out in the attacks. These people are down-to-earth, hard-working people that just want to do the right thing for British Columbia. I'm very proud to be leading this team. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you. We'll get a picture of us three, and then with those two coming, take the middle one. Okay, guys, hop in.
I was just parking cars.
They'll let anybody in.
Be the Conservative Party of British Columbia, and put your hand up for volunteering, and please donate to the party. We need some funds in order to launch the campaign here in South Surrey, White Rock. So please, in all sincerity, do that. Thank you very much.
Congratulations, Bryan.
They're doing a protesting as opposed to. Someone's listening.